Hi.
Hello.
Okay. Couple things. I just got into a big disagreement with Corbin. Yep. He's over there all mad at me. He wanted to climb all over my desk, and just before I started, I'm like, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" Now he's all fussy guts about it. Ridiculous that I have a fight with a cat. Anyhow, so today, a couple things. One is I talked to somebody last night, and they didn't quite get my latest one-page story. So one of the things that I've been doing since the start of the year is I haven't been posting one-page stories. I've been working from a one-page story principle. Come on back up, you sensitive lunatic. Get up here. What a crybaby. Anyways, so I haven't been working on one-page stories. I've been working on interconnected stories that, but working from the one-page principle. Now he's beating up his pickle. He has a pickle toy full of catnip. Anyways, and tying those together into a larger narrative that's, I've got the first 15 planned out. So what I got on the screen now is what I started at the beginning of the year with. Hiya, Jim. Welcome aboard, sir. Captain. So the pages that I've been doing are these as follows, where it's just a sci-fi story that is connecting a whole bunch of ideas, and I'm developing some of these characters and interconnecting them as I go along. So I'm having a ball doing this, but it has stepped me away from the one-page story motif. It's not that I'm not doing them, it's just that I'm not posting them on here. Hiya, Linda. Welcome aboard. Hiya, Tim. So, and then the latest, of course, was this one. And then I've got 4 more for posting this week. But the whole principle of the thing is to examine these individual stories of these different characters and then to interweave them together into the larger narrative, and then take that larger narrative and get the responses to it, get the reactions to it. But before I can get the reactions to it, I kind of want people to have an idea who these characters are first. And so I'm having fun doing that. The pacing of it's a lot slower than what I normally do, because what I normally do is introduce character and context, and here's the situational thing, and here's the outcome. Da-da-ding, da-da-doom, ba-da-boom, and I don't get too in depth into everybody. This is a chicken running for president, and so you've got to take a lot of things on base. Like it's a chicken that's running for president, so you associate chicken attributes, you associate presidential attributes, or the expectation thereof, and then you contextualize those things, and that facilitates for me you understanding where I'm going with the narrative. You're a lunatic. He's running around playing. Hi, Susanna. Welcome aboard. So when you're doing a longer form story, and you're doing it where there's not some big action outcome every page. There is an action outcome on each page, but it's not some grand positioned idea of chicken running for president, or chicken president, whatever the heck I said. And so because of that, optimally, the reader, it's better if they sit down in one position with the entirety of a story in front of them, that they can move through it at their own pace. It's hard to do that when you're posting on a daily basis, without having the expectation that people are going to go back X amount of days and find the preceding elements of the story and go back to the beginning point. That's the reason I did the page, this dramatic, it's been 330,000 known years since the dawn of humanity. It's differentiated enough from any of the one-page stories before it. And it's sort of, that's the marker, basically, is what I'm saying. So that if you go back through whatever posts that I've put out, looking for where the marker is of where this all begins, that's the marker. Whether people understand that or get that, I don't know, because I don't think people read a lot of the textual matter that's underneath the image post, right? So, which becomes almost superfluous material, but at the same time it facilitates search engines and things like that when you put those hashtags in and so forth. And it's challenging, you know. How do you make clear to everybody, go back and read through this, when people are prepositioned to think that I only do one-page stories? And let's be honest, you know, it's over 700 in the last 2 years, so it's completely meritorious that they think that I only do one-page stories. I'm just trying something different, just taking a momentary sidestep. It's not that I'm not doing one-page stories. I'm still doing them. In addition to doing these whoops, sorry, buddy. In addition to doing this overarching story. Oh, I see. Oh, Jim, I'll answer you in a little bit. Jim sent me a message. So, yeah. So the whole idea here is to play with this notion of a larger development of story, utilizing all the things that I've learned along the way, doing all of these one-page stories, because there's certain things that we learn from. You learn to self-actualize when you step back enough to recognize what facility that you have and lean into it and realize that, oh, I have these abilities, or I've garnished this knowledge, so let's put this into place. Because if there's one thing that I think I've learned from doing the one-page stories, is an immediate way to distill larger ideas in a minimal amount of space, and more importantly, the ability to shift and weave back and forth between what's going on with these characters, what's going on with that characters. And by having the ability to do that each day and try to come up with the new idea of story and new way of putting that out there with whatever mediums at the time, it's sort of allowed me to hone that, to sharpen that knife a little bit. Whereas before, oftentimes, and let me put, here, grab some paper to do this. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the camera for a sec. I can come back and show that story if people are interested. Okay, paper. So, oftentimes, when people are looking at the story idea, okay, story idea. All right, put an R on there and be an idea. Anyway, so when they do this and they're going to plot it out, okay, so they think about all of these characters that they have, and well, I'll do it like this. Bob, Bill, Betty, and let's say Belinda. So Bob, Bill, Betty, and Belinda. Bob, Bill, Bill. So Bob, Bill, Betty, and Belinda. So you got 4 characters, and how do I tell this complex story? Okay, let's look at this. The Scooby Gang, okay? The Scooby Gang is Fred, Thelma, Wilma, and Shaggy, and Shaggy's dog. So the Scooby Gang principle is that oftentimes in the episodic television that the Scooby-Doo show was, is that you would see them break off into groups. Fred and Wilma, and then Shaggy and Scooby, Thelma on her own sometimes, or Thelma with Shaggy and Scooby. And so you would have this divide and conquer mentality. So 2 went down this path and 2 went down that path, and the show now has to interweave what's going on with Shaggy and Scooby trying to find the kitchen in the haunted castle in order to make sandwiches, because of course a haunted castle would have a fully stocked kitchen to make sandwiches with, while Fred and Velma are looking for the magic coat hanger that opens up the secret tunnel to find out where the bad guy's secret lair is. Whereas, you know, if you're going to divide Thelma off onto her own, you know, she's found some glow-in-the-dark footprints that she's pursuing, and that's, you know, takes her on her journey. And so the writer then has to weave in these three different elements. So you've got, you know, Bob going off, Bill and Betty going off, and then, you know, Belinda and the dog. So I'm just going to use these names instead of Scooby-Doo gang. So now, through the course of your story, right? So if you're going to have your characters divide and conquer, is what I'm calling it. And what you've got is their own individual plot threads going on. So your first part of your plot is your problem, right? So there's your problem, there's your characters, and then here's the track where they divide and conquer. And so you've got them going on their individual course of action. And so whatever that is, you know, let's say Bob is Velma. So there's footprints. These two are secret tunnel, and these two are kitchen, making kitchen sandwich. And you'll usually see how that then flips over, right? So that the guys that are in the kitchen trying to make a sandwich, a door opens in the kitchen and out comes the ghost, or the person dressed up as a ghost. And so that individual now, so you've got the metaphysical aspects with the first two character paths, their arc, and then that third one that's gone off on a tangent gets drawn back in by having the bad guy go to it. So the tonality of the story still stays in place. And so with that in mind, you've got to figure out now how to weave another one of the characters or a couple more of the characters back in. So as the guys go, like, dude, let's get out of here, right, roast, you know, and they go running down the hallway, and they run into Thelma, who's been following the footprints to the secret wall where they stop because the ghost went through that magic secret door and appeared in the kitchen. So now they've run into each other in the hallway, and all three of them are running from the ghost, right? And you know, they run down, they find the magic hanger just completely by will of accident, and then they go running down the stairs and run into Thelma and Fred, where they confront the ghost, because during the course of this zany adventure of the three characters running from the ghost, Wilma and Fred would have discovered the secret trappings, the secret lair, where you find out here's all the makeup and here's all the glow-in-the-dark business that makes this person be able to dress up as a ghost. So now you got everybody together, and now the ghost comes up to him and they go, he's not a ghost at all, and they throw a sack over his head, tie him up with a chain or whatever it is, and then, you know, they pull off his mask, and he would have got away with it wasn't for those pesky kids. So that divide and conquer, it becomes this sort of lattice of those stories interweave back into a central point. So it's almost like the plot does this, breaks off, they go this way, everybody ties together in whatever way, and then there's your outcome. So that's what I'm trying to do with this larger story. I don't know why I felt compelled to explain that to everybody today, but I did. But it's through the course of figuring out how to tell a story about, you know, chicken running for president, and how to tell a story, you know, about the time I fell out of an airplane and landed on a brick of cheese, or or figuring out how to tell a story about, you know, the plight of the homeless in San Diego. And so whatever different avenues and perspectives and approaches I would take to story, how do we weave those into a larger narrative? And so I think that's helped me a lot. And sometimes it's through the little things, the little actualizations, I think, that help to get a story out of yourself, or to allow yourself to facilitate a story. The challenge of the big plot, and it's appropriate that the word problems beside that, which of course is in context to this, but the challenge of the plot problem is, hey, why don't you write a story? Okay, why don't I make it incredibly complex and problematic, and therefore more than likely that I won't execute the story. And it's something that we do, and that, or we develop ourselves to the point to be able to facilitate the larger story, the larger narrative, the more complex narrative. So we oftentimes you'll see somebody go, oh, I'm going to do a book, and their book is about something that has a linear track, like super positive person versus super negative person, and at the end super positive, da 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 da, I've won, and everybody goes yay and claps. So that's a very linear thing of the positive negative conflict. And or another one may well be that's a good suggestion. Corbin suggested an idea. John Cusack, he said, goes to a record store. Oh, he owns a record store. And that's a movie. You're talking about a movie. Anyways, so John Cusack manages a record store. He's trying to find love. And he's dating in all the wrong ways and regaling his misadventures with his record store staff and trying to solve his neuroses. So that's a linear story about our guy, but it adds an extra element to it in that what happened last night, and he reflects on what happens last night. So now you've got an extra layer, right? So your storytelling is, you're able to look at not just a linear event, you're able to look at your linear event happening, but keep touchstoning back into something that happened, off screen or the night before. Come on. We're making friends. Say hi. Yeah, you doing, everybody? It's me, Corbin. Right on. Happy now? He's happy now. So that's a challenge, right? And then you've got a further development where you could have a he said, she said. So he talks about, the trials and tribulations of trying to find love in the modern age, and regaling it to his co-worker / employees. And then, as he does this flashback and talks about the night before, and the guys are like, nobody would believe that, and then you can cut over to another person's response where it's one of the pals or co-worker employees of the other person that was on that date, and they say nobody would believe that, and no, it really happened, and they tell it from their perspective. So now you've taken this linear narrative and you've split it, and now it's a he said, she said, right? So now they've both got their perspectives on the same thing that happened, and now we've got this romantic journey of these two characters trying to come together. So, and then you build on that and build on that. So we start getting into the complexity of all the other staff trying to find relationships, and her friends are looking for love, and his friends are looking for love, and quinky dink, everybody's looking for love, and they all pair up, and by the end of it you got multiple couples, and it's all chaos. So there's a number of different ways of building on that progression. But I still go back to, before getting into all of this, start in that early way. Start in that early means. Tell the story about the torture of going to the dentist. Tell the story about the example I always use of Bob opens the fridge, there's no milk. Bob has to go to the store and get milk. And along the way, nuclear apocalypse, alien invasion, he stubs his toe on a pebble on the ground and almost trips and falls, but it's okay, he caught himself. Gets to the variety store. Hey, he's got the milk. He forgot his wallet and he has to go back to the start again. There's four parts: context, conflict, content to climax, right? And then its conclusion. So, and then you can just build and build and build and expand, right? And have the alien invasion, the nuclear apocalypse, all that stuff. So it expands your story, but the principle of it is 1, 2, 3, 4. So before any of that's available to do, sometimes it's about idea generation. So I put a thing up for the video today that's page breakdowns and how they can, inspire creativity. So what I'm referring to there is, for anybody that's following my Patreon, I posted 28 pages before the end of last year. And I did 342 pages and finished pages at last year. And then I did 28 of these. And so what it is just sketching out a page. I'll zoom in, if that is a benefit. So I sketch out a page. Ooh, washing it. Hey, relax. How do I get that to calm down? I don't know. Anyhow, so by yeah, I'll just pull off that camera, it stinks. So by working out this idea, it's the tough guy entrance. Here they come, being all cool and macho. And we're going to punch you in the nose, says one of the tough guys. And wait, I'm not ready yet, says the person that they're saying this to. It's a silly idea. It's a momentary notion. But we're establishing all kinds of story ideas and story structure, right? So by doing a whole bunch of these, where you're sitting down with imagery and trying to expand some stories out of that, and then occasionally in here you'll see where I've written in red study. It's where I'm looking at a page out of somebody else's book and I'm replicating it just because I think it's a really interesting image and how can that inform me. Linda says, by being consistent you end up with a whole body of work. Yeah, it's important. Discipline and consistency is important when the affordance is available, right? Then you can actualize on that consistency and discipline a little bit more. But I recognize that not everybody has the availability of time and space to do that. But if you can try that out in whatever time and space you have available to you, or carve yourself out some time, then it allows you to be able to drop down into that flow, to drop down into your creative recesses and utilize those, identify those, and spill them out on a paper. And so one of the things I'm getting to with this is that the notion, whatever the story is, even if you're just scribbling pictures at first and just stuff around you that you see you think looks interesting and you just start drawing into little panels, what that can, and you go back and put text on it later, let's say, right? But what that can give you is information about how do I allow myself to just not worry so much about the grand plot, the grand narrative. How do I allow myself to just sit down for a moment and play with ideas and just play with the notion of, I'm going to scribble out some stuff. The giant ball crashes to earth, bounces once, rolls to a stop, Yes, says the narrative, right on the spot. And then there's our person saying, yes. And so the other person says, I don't get it. What's so exciting? And then another person says to them, it's a sports thing, dear. Why is there a giant ball? Why is this such an exciting thing? None of that matters right now. I'm just playing with drawing some fun ideas and exploring how to put these marks down on paper. But more importantly than that, it's enabling me to just start to more readily access story opportunities. And so so what I'm advocating is that instead of focusing that I need to sit down and to finish, to draw these finished pages, to draw these finished stories, my objective is to sit down and come out with this completed result. Completed result is a subjective thing. It's not always about doing the completed and final, polished off to the best of your abilities piece. Sometimes a completed result is just sitting down with paper or in a booklet or whatever it is, excuse me, and playing with a story idea. I'm drawing these circles. I don't know what they mean. I got these guys with their hands up in front of what looks like crystals or pyramids, and then it looks like two people exchanging something. So it says that he traveled through time and space, going from one adventure to another, bouncing about with abandon, largely due to the fact that they couldn't control their traveling machine. So, whatever the intention was when I'm scribbling this, doodling these images, it turns out to be, I don't know, maybe a commentary on Doctor Who. But it's just allowing myself to play with page breakdowns, to play with illustration images, very rudimentary. Allow yourself that to. Is it recognizable to you? Okay, good. It doesn't have to be recognizable to everybody as yet, because this is for your own idea generation purposes. So going through a whole bunch of these are studies. Pardon me. I'm still trying to get better. So going through a whole bunch of these and playing with these ideas allows me to, start to develop some larger ideas. And you can draw back on those ideas later. You can explore some things that you may well want to utilize in the future. I don't know why I didn't take a drink when I was holding my drink. Anyways, so yeah, so that's the thing, right? And so once you start feeling comfortable on some level, see, I switch formats from the portrait format of upright to the landscape format of side to side. And the reason that I do that is because the one pages that I've been doing for X amount of time now are largely in that landscape format, and I'm starting to identifiably find different approaches and means to tell story that I don't necessarily recognize an awful lot of other people doing, because most people just work in a portrait format. And I'm really exploring and playing with those visual elements. So I started drawing here. So these 4 images, what this really is a 4-page breakdown of an idea where a number of these characters amongst this larger group, so many died. I scratched out, they all died. That's a little concluding. Hey, the story's over. So many died, and so here's all these individuals that are no longer with this team. And then she arrived, and so I've got a picture of the planet, and I've got a picture of this lady dropping down from above and walking towards this environment in the background. And so somebody goes in order to meet up with her because they don't know who this lady is, moving into this environment, and she holds up her magic hands and holds them, that just stops them within space, and with her, it says schrack, in order to denote that this is her ability, the sound of her ability. And the last panel is a person trying to struggle, but they can't move. And then everybody else that's in this remaining group shows up, and she says, hold on, let me can we all stop? And she lets this other person down and says, I'm here to help. So this here is a little story notion that I'm pursuing about how do I tell this story of this larger group. And my first inclination was, let's just start with the larger group. But the challenge that I discovered in that is, if you look at this, how many characters am I actually telling a story about? Pardon me. And, it's kind of rhetorical. I'm not expecting people to answer. One. I would arguably say it's one character that I'm telling a story about, and that's... Now, in that context, I'm telling the story about the larger group and how this person fits in it, but the only character that I'm developing, really, is the lady who comes down, holds this other person at bay. The whole group shows up, and she says, wait a minute, I'm here to help. But the only character exploration that's happening there, and the only character development that's really happening there, is that one person, whereas everybody else is either placeholder guy who can't move in a larger group of non-entities that are symbolic representations of characters. So that was how I was going to start this sci-fi story that I'm telling now. And then the realization sits in for me that that doesn't work, because I'm so used to telling, all these different one-page story, and allowing myself to be able to compartmentalize a larger narrative in a smaller amount of space with each page. Chicken runs for president, the plight of individuals in San Diego, and to be able to switch and tack from thing to thing. That why am I spending 4 pages to tell one idea? So that's where I started to re-explore it. And the first thing I did was, well, maybe I need to start, at the beginning of all things, and have some explorers at some big space graveyard. That doesn't work. I don't want to do that. Or here's an Adam and Eve, beginning of the world type thing. Nah, I don't want to do that. So, so I sit down and I start. So then I figure I'm going to start with our first character, principal character. And I begin with going back to like an origin point of, here she is, a little girl in a hospital in the future in outer space, and she's got constant headaches, and they can't figure out what's wrong with her, and she's always hiding and until they can make a breakthrough. And then the intention is to build out the rest of this thing, which is not what these are. But the intention would be to take these next 4 things, and the next 4 pages, and the next page would be about her and her pubescence, as she's starting to, the headaches are going away, but she keeps hearing voices. And at this point, the doctors just think that it's unfortunate that this poor little girl is crazy and we don't have space medicine to make her better. And, I use this silly language not to be disingenuous to the ideas, but to just keep it basic, right? So no space medicine to make the girl more stable. And then the third page would be the doctors going into the room, and she's calm and composed at this point, but the revolution now, the reveal now is that she can read minds. She can read thoughts. The voices that she's been hearing is other people's thoughts from around the station. The anxiety and headaches and all that stuff was because it hadn't fully developed yet, and so it was making her distracted and crazy and in pain as a younger person. But now she has the facility to read thoughts. And in this world, that's bad. The government and everybody doesn't like people who can read thoughts. So we got to get this girl out of here. And so the next thought was that the government shows up immediately and just takes her with them. And she says, the scientists here did bad things, and so they take away the bad guys. And I realized, no, that's close-ended, right? So what I end up doing is I ended up skipping to the third page. So this thing introduces the space station she's on. And the dialogue introduces the doctor saying, how is it we haven't figured this out until now? And the next page is, we got to get her out of here. And then when they go in the room, she's already heard everything that they're talking about because she could read their minds out in the hallway. So she gets it. And then the one of the scientists says, listen, don't tell anybody you can do this because they won't like you if you do that. And so I've eliminated this whole, the military shows up right then and there and arrests the scientist for being bad. And now she's off with the military, and I have to follow that track of story. But what I realized in doing this page, and it all started back from this, trying to scribble together, hold on a sec, trying to scribble together these ideas. But what I recognized from that is, okay, now I'm in this character's story. I get it now. I understand this. But what this allows you to do, and doing these quick little breakdowns of these ideas that might come to your head, what it does is it saves you some of that extraneous labor of illustrating entire pages that you're going to go back later on and edit out, because maybe you're going to realize that they're unnecessary to the course of the narrative. So by sitting down and doing these breakdowns in this really simplistic way, it allows you to presuppose the labor that you're going to have to do in order to finish that page. And it's really easy to scan a breakdown like this into your computer and blow it up into a larger larger page format, so that you can do another layer over top of it, and or you can print it out at the proper size and draw the proper page over top, like do the line work and do the proper details and all those things like that for you to execute your page. So this isn't to waste. You don't have to replicate this so much as enhance it now. You've done the effort, you've done the work in order to try to craft that narrative, to try to craft that page. And if this one doesn't work out, these extra squares, bump, 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 that you've put down on this page, and a way that you can do something like this is if you measure it once on a piece of paper that fits underneath the papers that you have, then you can trace through that. You can't really see it so much, but it's there. You can then trace those squares onto this page, so you don't have to measure this out every single time. In this case, I'm putting them in a book, right? So I just stick it in. So I've measured it to the page of the book. I slide it under there. I put the new squares in, slide in there, and so on and so forth. So, but what if this one doesn't work? Okay, so ignore these right now. But if this one doesn't work out, like I like the idea of it, but I don't find the page is interesting enough, or I don't find that the pacing of it is right. Something's off on that, or the spacing is out of whack. Well, you've got these three other squares on this page. You've got three more squares that you can try to re-envision that breakdown. Change things up, shake things up a little bit, and implement the different ways that you would lay it out instead. And the complexity of how you draw, that's entirely up to you, because, well, this part here works, okay? I like this panel. I don't want to change this one, but I don't like that first panel. I'm going to change that up a little bit, and then this one I think needs to be wider, and then you see the girl behind the bed, even though there's a tiny version of her and a larger version. I think I'll just make this one panel where you can just see the girl hiding behind her bed in the second panel. And so you draw out those changes in this one, but you know that's good. That's good, that's good. So you're just redrawing this top half of the breakdown. And again, it takes what can be intensive labor of doing these, a more, go back to this again, a more finished page. It takes away the time and the effort and, all the different steps along the way of doing the finished page, and allows you to invest a smaller amount of time trying to figure out, hey, how am I going to block this out? Now, oftentimes, a lot of creators, when they'll get a script, and so, girl, headache, and doctors, and so they'll get this, so they'll highlight these key points within this larger script of whatever from the author, and they'll highlight those key points, and then they'll start breaking down. They got to introduce the girl to show that she's got a headache. Can they do that in one panel? And then here's these doctors coming in, and and so they'll start doing that rough work, like so, and they'll do it in this simplistic format. They're called thumbnails, and this is like a thumbnail breakdown. Other creators will take these notes for this story, and so they'll start crafting out, here's the girl, and she's got a headache, and they'll do it in this really loose way. But what they'll do is they'll figure out all their proportions, and they'll figure out their perspectives, and they'll do all of this really rough work, take another piece of paper, put it over top, but they're still working at a larger scale. But that works for them. Brian Hitch works that way, who's a great illustrator and the co-creator of the Ultimates for Marvel, which is actually what all of those early Marvel Universe movies are based on. That book. The reinterpretations of Captain America and everybody else is based on Mark Millar and Brian Hitch's Ultimates. And so he had a really realistic drawing style. And in this reinterpretation of Marvel's existing characters since 1960, they put a different perspective contemporary to the 2000s when they created this book. And Brian Hitch just happened to draw Nick Fury to look like Samuel Jackson. And so when they made these motion pictures, they cast Samuel Jackson as that character. But it has an awful lot to do with this artist's illustrated work. He works at full size with sheets of paper, and he does this really rough approach to breaking down the page, and he'll put all those rough shapes in with one color, and then he'll take a second color and he'll start cleaning it up, and he'll start tightening in and picking and choosing all of these random lines that he made the first time around. So it's a different approach, but it works for him. So while he's doing this same sort of thing, he's doing it on a larger scale. So again, it's about comfort and what people find. Lawson, hi Lawson, welcome aboard, says, when I do pages, I'll often figure out my key or anchor panel layout. First, the panel that will offer up the most impact on the page visually, and then I'll build a page design around that panel. See, that works. And I'm sure that anchor panel that you're choosing, Lawson, is the key point of information in the page. It's not just the key visual. It's the key point that you want the reader to identify with, that this is really what this page is about. It's not just Spider-Man swinging through the sky. Righto, says Lawson. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's the element that you want to get across in your page, is what Austin just wrote down, the big storytelling point. So for each page, we want to figure out what's going on. This is why in this page, the largest image, in this page, this largest image is girl holding her head. She has headaches and they don't know why. So, depending on what the action is in the page, you want to figure that out. So if you have to change your breakdowns, if you have to figure out readdressing, and a number of different little thumbnails, a number of little breakdowns, or large rough pencil work in order to find the same thing, however it is that you approach it, if you have to rework elements of that until you find that flow, that energy, so that the visual image follows the course of the story, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just about how much how you want to approach it and whatever works best for you. So whether it's a large size or it's a thumbnail size or if it's just a little breakdown size, explore that. And there's a problem that introduced himself into sequential storytelling in the I believe it was in the late 80s, 1990s, early 1990s. And that was, the art was not principally there for a lot of creators to facilitate the story. The art was there to look awesome first, and then the story was written around it. And I'm not saying it's universal. I'm not saying it was across the board. Not in no way would I disservice an entire, industry like that. But there was a lot of really popular examples of that being the case, where you had an awful lot of pages where you had two people standing side by side in these dramatic poses while they're talking about some story point that's has emotional impact and things like that. But these two hands on hips big characters that are running along this entire side of the page, that doesn't sell that at all. There's no storytelling in that. The visual element does not match the textual element or the story point. Lawson says, story first, clarity being key. I'm not concerned with pinups. I'm concerned with story first and foremost, keeping the story clear yet visually interesting and exciting. Bingo. Lawson says, I grew up on comics by Kirby, Ditka, Wood, Toth, and Eisner. Characters have to be doing things, not just standing around flexing and gritty teeth. Excellent. Lawson, I think you and I agree. So, the best, in my opinion, the best how to make comics and sequential art book that I discovered in my younger days was Will Eisner's. How to tell comics and how to tell comics and sequential art. And I've got soft cover copies and hardcover copies of that book. To me, while a lot of people think it might have, there's challenges because it follows the convention of its day, and that the spirit comic that Will Eisner created had, the cheap laugh sidekick, which is culturally inappropriate. Aside from that, which is just historicity, right? Aside from that, if it were to be remade today, that character doesn't exist, right? It's an incredibly in-depth book about how to storytell using words and pictures. And it's an incredibly fine example of it, as opposed to just getting a book about how to write or getting a book about how to draw. It's important that it fuses those two elements, because that's really what sequential art is. Linda says, that's a great approach, Lawson. Sorry I have to run class today. Hey, take care, Linda. Thanks for stopping by. Yep, and Linda, the moderator with the mostest. Thanks so much. So the challenge is always principally, first and foremost, what is the idea you're trying to convey on a page? And so when you're looking at, going back to this plotting, when you're looking at constructing the larger narrative, then that's when we have to look at it and go, oh, what's this key page about? What's this page about? What's this page about? What's this page about? And break down whatever's happening on that page, whatever you're conveying visually on that page that goes along with the textual elements. You want to make sure that the reader understands this. Like there's this page is, just give me a sec, I gotta switch the camera again. So this page is, well, I've got to cut off with my big noggin. This is about this brother and sister, in the fact that they're getting on a shuttle and going off to find work elsewhere so that they can send money back and support their family. And so the principal thing, the largest image that sort of steps out from the others is brother and sister with backpacks on. You know, if I contextualize it, it's here's a space asteroid, here's brother and sister with backpacks on, and the rest of it is about them going through the narrow corridors with all the people out into a hangar. Here's the ship, we got to get on it, let's go. And so it's about figuring out that. It's about figuring out what is the point of this page. And if the larger plotting thing doesn't work for people, playing with breakdowns, like these, playing with breakdown pages allows you to just explore an idea. This is a punch-up. So in this punch-up page, pow, knocks away the bad guy, looks this way. There's another one, pow, hits that bad guy. Other bad guys are shooting at our character. They're holding up their, super strong, super resilient arm and stopping the bullets from hitting them in the face. It's just a punch-up page. But by having pow and then looking this way and pow hitting the person this way, what I'm trying to do is to identifiably recognize for the reader that we're focused on how this person is Action Jackson beating up the bad guys. And this just continues on for a few more pages. But it's just playing, and it's just exploring approaches to how do we execute imagery on a page and in order to facilitate our story. Movement forward. Lawson says, I had the good fortune to attend 2 years at the Joe Kubert School of Graphic Art back in the mid-90s. I learned a lot. Pardon me. I learned a lot there. I'm cut from the old school cloth. Lawson says, that's a nice page that establishes location, characters, and sets things up nicely. Oh, thanks very much, Lawson. Yeah, to have the facility to be taught by people that have fantastic ability for conveyance of story. Joe Kubert, the fact that Joe Kubert started that school is a great credit to an industry, because you've got a guy who really gets it and really has the facility for really good storytelling. And I mean, his tenure in an industry goes way back to the early days of it in North America. So, and then of course that carries on with his sons, and who are also in the industry, and all the other staff and employees that have been hired through there for all the years of its operation. Because what was it, 74? I think it started, something like that. Changing direction and flow in action sometimes add tension, which is good for fight scenes at times. Yeah, it's if you've got a page where your action character is moving just left to right, punch, 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 and then you drop down to the next tier in a page, and it's punch, 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 punch across that as well. There's a bit of a disconnect in that. I find that the readers just, it loses its impact. It loses its sense of action. It's not to say that you can't have definable parameters about this person's here and that person's there. But I'm trying to think of what it was called. There's a really fantastic book that came out, maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago. Luther Strange? I'm sorry, I can't remember the name right now, and I apologize for that. There is a really aggressive fight choreography in that book of this character who fights these larger odds. And yet at the same time, the layout of it, everything makes sense. You actually can appreciatively understand this action to that action, elbow that way, uppercut this way, in a way that you don't see an awful lot. Like it's a proper brawl, and the proper brawl illustrated in such a way that it looks like fight choreography from a motion picture without becoming laboriously dragged down by pacing, so that you just feel like, I'm flipping through 6 pages of punch, 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 punch. There's more to it than that. And I thought that was rather impressive. I'm trying to think of what there's another book I'm thinking of. Title completely escapes me. But it's basically supremely trained military fighter for this side, supremely trained military fighter for this side, We've seen examples of previous issues of this person's actions and abilities, this person's actions and abilities, and the point of this story, this nexus point that they move to, is to get these people face to face. And when that happens, what follows in that issue is this extremely capable choreography of these two characters facing off, that the build-up has entirely led towards. So when you get to this case, and in this case there's not a lot of verbiage going on, it's a lot of the physical stuff, but they earned it because they worked all of that time, all of these issues building up to they're gonna go. And it's almost like, let's go back to motion capture. Like if you go to a film or an animation or whatever it is, where you see the physical exempling of this, the physical exempling of that, the tension build up from this perspective, the tension build up from that perspective, and it all leads to a head where the two of them face off. It's not belabored or dragged down by too much external exposition or too much break into pacing, because we have to cut over to this page where X bad guy says, I've got money riding on this dude, and the other person says, oh, I hope he saves us all. No, it's just straight up biff pow boom. I'll try to remember what the title of that one is, and I'll put it up. Right, you want impact in a fight scene. If you have a character punching against the flow of the eye flow, it can ratchet up the impact a lot. I'd use that sort of thing on a haymaker. Hey, there you go. Oh yeah, that's a fun thing when you see that the big pow come into place and it breaks the panel, and the big pow, socks the person basically into like a next panel. I always love things like that. That just shows real kinetic activity and real action. There's a fun execution of dramatic action and tension in a page. I'm going to go back to Brian Hitch, and maybe it's the first issue or second issue of the Ultimates, I'm not sure, but Captain America has to go, and another character is rampaging through the streets, and they have to be stopped, and one of the other characters has tried to stop him, and no, it hasn't worked out. And so Captain America is called in to deal with it, and he's being flown over the scene in central New York in a helicopter, and they say, we're just looking for a place to land, sir. And he says, just get me above where the situation is. And they go, we're above it now. So he goes, okay, and he jumps out of the helicopter. And there's the immediate reaction of the guys going, he didn't even have a parachute. But the shot is this large, really lovely contextual scene of the skyscrapers of New York and the Times Square building, and it's very tall and thin, and you've got this tiny, here's the helicopter here, and you've got this tiny Captain America dropping, and then it opens up in the impact of him landing. And if that doesn't sell, oh boy, I don't know what does, right? It's a fantastic way to identifiably say here's where it's happening, and you've already seen precursors of this back and forth between this person trying to corral this person, but it adds this epic air to this character who's just, his facility is far greater than you might expect initially. He jumps out of a helicopter right, down stories of space into the middle of it all, and it just sells in such a way, and it adds all of this fantastic physical and dynamic tension to story. And so you've got to figure that when Brian Hitch is taking sheets of paper and scribbling these ideas on this scale, that informs him of utilizing the size of this page in such a way that he can focus on these large element illustrations and having this little Captain America here. But because of the scale he's working up his images on, I think that might help him to do that. Whereas you work smaller, tighter thumbnails, you might not initially think on that level. Maybe nay. I don't know. John Mishima was good at doing those full-page collage fight scenes. No panels, but the figures fighting laid out, sometimes overlaying each other, various size figures for visual interest. You'd have Conan vs. Foe drawing on a big page about 5 or 6 times at different points in a fight. Fun break from panel boxes. Nice. That's true. And you'd see a lot of that, though, in the Conan books. It was almost like an expected part of the narrative of Conan. Sword, bad guy from the opposite direction. Sword, clang, and then fencing moves. Or it's just so... It was a nice part of Conan. It was a part of the visual language of that book, I think, is that you really got to see Barbarian in overdrive. And there's been some interesting books that have come out since then. Northlanders was a book. I'm trying to think of who illustrated that, and it's not coming to mind right off the top. I want to say Gordon Parloff, but I don't think that's correct. And Northlanders is a Viking story. And there was always a part of me that thought that was what was missing. Was that circular dance fight scene. Because there's an awful lot of those moments that happen over the course of that larger narrative of that series. But there's a little part of me that always sort of wanted that Buscema-esque, it's 6-7 drawings of the same guy on the pages. He's fighting off all of these guys. And I always felt that when you see, stab, 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 it gave you this sense of heightened odds against the character too, because he has to fight off all of these individuals. So, I don't know. One of my favorite fight scenes in comics is Paul Smith's Wolverine versus Silver Samurai fight. 4 or 5 pages of brilliance. Paul Smith is if you get the opportunity to look up Paul Smith's work, he did a great run in the X-Men 1980s, and then he did a really great run on X Factor some years later, where he just has this really lovely, clean style, but everything has a purpose in Paul Smith's work. I always appreciated that about Paul Smith, but again, one of those people that isn't praised enough, like James Sherman for DC Comics drawing Legion of Superheroes. It was like a high point for me when he would show up on that title. And that goes back to the 70s. Frank Miller was working on Daredevil. A lot of great cinematic fight scenes that made that run memorable. A lot of there's a page where it has an arrow is shot in this panel. Let go. Arrow moves. A throwing star. It goes past the guy who throws throwing star. So now the arrow is in the middle of a throwing star, and then it goes past the person who touches it as it goes by and sets it on fire. But it just introduces each of the characters and each of their abilities in this ninja group in one page, and each panel is exposition on each of their characters visually. And I think that's great storytelling. I know a lot of people sing the praises of Frank Miller when he went off to do 300. I don't think it touches his Daredevil run. I think that it's not appreciated enough in his oeuvre. I think that in his overall arc of work, I think that Daredevil stuff is so powerful that it's everything else is great. Not dismissing it. It's just, to me, that's his high point. And a lot less splash pages, and a lot more panel to panel, character development. And yeah, I'm a big fan of when David Mazzucchelli worked with Frank Miller on year 1 for Batman, because if you get a chance to look at David Mazzucchelli's work, and if I'm mispronouncing it, I apologize, that's a powerful storyteller right there. His Batman year 1, it's great. It's great storytelling. He switches up angles and perspectives. There's a fight scene on a fire escape with Batman and some thugs. And who do I save? The bad guy or the television they were trying to steal? And then the text works so well with it, where he grabs somebody going over the railing, and I can feel my shoulder pop. It says textually, and it's like, that's fusion, folks. Conan is such a great organic book. Loved it so much. I learned to draw horses from Jose Delbo, who taught at the Kubrick School. Can't draw Conan without knowing how to draw horses. Oh, he hits enough of them. Paul Smith recommended pencil issue 2 of Rocketeer Spirit. He's a great guy. Oh, that's fantastic. Dee Dee was his best work. That we're in reference to Frank Miller. Year 1 is a storytelling textbook. Oh yeah, it really is. And do I have it here? What do I have? So here is David Mazzucchelli on Daredevil Born Again. And one of the beautiful things about this, there's one single panel, and yet that one single panel tells us so much. Here he is, flying, defying logic and gravity, back arcing over a building. You get the impression that he's going to flip over and land on his feet. Through the smoke, through the fire of somebody's chimney. Just bing bow poom, But there's so much interesting stuff that is done in the storytelling techniques of Mazzucchelli that just carries us across. Look here. Night falls too quickly. There's our city shot, so it contextualizes we're in New York. Snow's got the traffic all snarled. Got here as fast as I could. And oh, it's not glory. And then we see the outcome of this apartment. Everything's smashed up. Took everything, Foggy. Came home. They've taken everything. And you see this ruin. And then he consoles the person who's gone through this. I mean, just a page like that conveys not just the visual representation of the physical action and this person trying to clean up their place after it's been destroyed, but all of that emotion is right there. And just a simple single thing. Or here he is running along the rooftops. He's talking about how the night greets him with wind and cold, and as he's jumps out of a fire escape, he's running along a power line. There's that early image I showed you where he flips over backwards. Here he is diving across the space between buildings. If that doesn't show the character Daredevil, I don't know what does. Anyways, Mazzucchelli, genius. Absolutely genius. And his independent work, just as great. I think he taught as well. I have that artist edition. It's so great to see the pages like that. That pan back shot sells all of the emotion. Oh yeah. And the whole thing about storytelling, and if you're not working from a script, if you're roughing things out from a visual standpoint, I think it's really important. And if you don't have a story structure to work from, if you don't have a pre-supplied script, if you yourself haven't taken the time to write out the script that you're then going to illustrate, and oftentimes when people do that, they presuppose the visual elements as they're writing it out. There's a great benefit to that in your story development. And different scripts will provide you with different elements of information. Warren Ellis, who, used to do an article called Come In Alone or something like that. In the early days of his career, he wrote a bit about the different interpretive ways that writers would convey story. And he talked about the Marvel method of the synopses, and then the artist works from that, the plot point of it. And then he talked about how Garth Ennis would write it, which was far more dialogue based, if I'm not mistaken. And then he talked about how Alan Moore would write it, which was very psychologically based. And so that, you've got the character, basically the gist of the scene is there's a person in duress inside of a room, and the villain is standing in the doorway of the room with weapon in one hand and a bag of something dripping in the other. There's a storm outside, and you need to convey the horror of the individual in the room and the menace of the bad guy in the room without revealing the bad guy. You know, and so the way that that's interpreted in those three different means shows that there can be so much investment in the textual part of it for how you want the person to visualize it. And Alan Moore's example, we see, I think he's called Big Jack Baby Wanamaker or something ridiculous, you know. But he's standing there with his back to the camera, smiling ironically. How do you draw the back of somebody's head smiling ironically? And it makes the artist think about that. It makes you think about how do you presuppose that and try to get across to the reader that there's this menacing, you know, maliciousness in this whole kind of a expression on the bad guy's face when you can't show the bad guy's face. How do you do that with the body, or how do you do that with the positioning of the images in the camera? Fantastic stuff. The pan back, yeah. There's a really interesting course on writing that with David Mamet, and if you're not familiar with David Mamet's work, I highly recommend you look into it. The most easily identifiable one and easily accessible one for most people is probably The Heist with Gene Hackman and Danny DeVito, and I think it might be the first film for oh my gosh, what's his name? I'm terrible with names, clearly. The actor who played Zaphod Beeblebrox in the Hitchhiker's movie. I can't remember his name right now. I think it might be his first film. Delroy Lindo in that is phenomenal. Ricky Jay's in that. But David Mamet's writing is very, very plot oriented with the scenes, and the scenes are very specific, and the specific actions of characters are important. But what's far more important, I think, that comes across with David Mamet's work is the immersion through dialogue. Something goes wrong in a jewelry heist, and one of the characters looks at the other and goes, "It's a bust, smile and fade." And he goes, "What? Time in this?" And he goes, "It's a bust, smile and fade. It's a bust. Let's go." You know, and that vernacular, that simplistic language of that, it sets the context incredibly well that these characters have this short speech, but what it allows the visual element to do is all of this expressive language and all of this emotional language, because the text isn't heavy. It allows that, you know, what? The money in this? And the other guy goes, "It's a bust, smile and fade." Like he proves his point. So you see that this person's confusion is here. This person's anxious and anger and upset over this thing failing. And then, you know, as they're exiting the failed moment, the third character, who might not necessarily realize is amongst them at first, if you miss the really subtle, somebody signals the one guy and the other guy goes like this, and as they're leaving, you hear the sirens and you know that they're in trouble now, and the one guy gives a notion to the other one and goes, "It's a bust," and the blue's on the way or something like that. I can't remember the specific language. And the other guy folds his newspaper that he's, of course, pretending to be reading on the street. He folds it up, tucks it under his arm, and nonchalantly walks in front of a car and gets hit by it in order to cause a distraction for the guys that were trying to rob the place to get away. So Mamet's writing of that has this simplistic interlaced language in this world narrative. But the visual elements and all of the development that it gives you visually to tell about each character is so. That's what, and I'm using film, but to draw that, phenomenal. I got to work from a Mark Waid script on Rocketeer Spirit. His script was great because it was complete enough, but he didn't dictate the image design necessarily. He gave direction with freedom. That's perfect. It's a visual medium. I primarily say it's not. It's the visual and textual fusion, but the textuals the writer should not dictate the artist. And so Wade's known to be really good for that. If I had a better idea, he'd always say go for it. I think that comes from being a playwright. Mamet is another genius at scripting. Oh, just phenomenal. And just a phenomenal writer in general. And with a laissez-faire attitude when you hear him talk. Anyways, the chance, the opportunity to write... Wade has here's a really good thing. Barry Kitson's art. Okay, here's a great Wade moment in comics. Two characters talking to one another, okay, through visual screens about the situation uprising with the youth in the city. We're gonna have to deal with this. You know, these things are a problem. Here's the socio-political situation. We're working on that. And these two people having this argument, this or with the problem and trying to outcome it. And as we're going through this back and forth, I can't remember if it's the end of the page or the end of the second page where it opens up and you realize they're standing back to back, facing these screens. And this entire back and forth between the two characters is entirely contrived. They're standing back to back, saying things to the screens, but they're saying things to each other. I don't know if Wade laid that out or if Kitson came up with it. That's genius. That's fantastic. I really, really appreciate and respect that kind of fusion of visual and textual element. That's the kind of thing that you get through doing page breakdowns and through doing for allowing yourself this sort of analysis of scene to scene to scene to scene to scene to scene, and to breaking down these things and to figuring out where can I go, how can I draw things, what's the futility of falling through the sky, you know. And then in addition to that, you know, sometimes it's just playing, sometimes it's just drawing, you know, and to take one photograph and examine all the facets of said photograph and figure out all those elements within it and how can you construct from that a larger narrative. And that sort of facilitates how to focus on things in a page as well. And you can do that by just doing thumbnails and breakdowns. So I think that the thing I'm trying to say is, you know, the 700 one-page stories I've done in the last 2 years has forced me to think about a lot of those things and to try a lot of different stuff, so that what I was talking about at the very beginning about this ongoing story that I've been posting each day on Instagram and Facebook is me trying to put those to, you know, to implement those in this larger story. I'm going to get back to the one-page stuff. I'm still taking suggestions of random ideas, a couple sentences, a line of dialogue, 3 words, whatever, and I'm still doing the one-page stories from those, and I'm, you know, continuing to do those throughout this year. But at the same time, you know, I just got to step away for a second and just explore this notion while it's in my head, and I might go 15 pages and stop, but I don't have another project right now, you know, because the one-page thing I do on a regular basis every day anyways, but I don't have an existing project at the moment, so that's why I'm doing this right now. And as soon as an existing project comes up, that time consumption swallows up continuing to be able to do the ongoing story, and it'll just be me falling back on the one pages. Or maybe not. Maybe I'll do it the other way around. I don't know yet. Lawston says, it's the kind of thing that makes comics special. It's a marriage of writing and drawing to create visual narrative in a way that no other medium can. Hey man, I have to run. I want to check out your live chat. You're obviously very skilled and quite the nice guy. I love chatting with you. Hey, thank you, Lawston. Thanks for coming by. I really appreciate that. The same for you as well. I definitely going to be investing some more time checking out what you're up to. Oh, this is great. Really great chatting with you. And thank you for your insights as well. There's such a thing as to the things we can glean from each other. And I know Lawston's got to go, but this is there's so much that we can learn from one another, and especially in a case where you've got somebody who's been working with a writer like Wade, and the education that he's received at the Kubert School. If you're interested in sequential storytelling and you're interested in pursuing an education in college, it's a college university level, look into the Joe Kubert School. Because if this is what you want to do and you want to work for companies for writing and illustrating stories, that's a fantastic place to go. It's a fantastic place that will teach you proper storytelling, and it's the one in North America, I would arguably say. I heard about one that it's either in Belgium or France. There's the preeminent institution over there for teaching storytelling, and of course, like all other things that involve a name, I can't immediately remember it right now, but I'll try to remember that and post that up. But by all means, if it's an interest that you have to tell stories, if it's an interest that you have to tell larger narratives, I highly encourage people to just try, scribbling out a little narrative. You don't have to put the text over top and have it finished and make sure all the word balloon placement's perfect. Just scribble it underneath the random writing of a synopsis of what this page is. And what that allows you, what that gives you, is the chance to explore these different random ideas that go through your head, to lay out a page. All these people in the city are concerned about what's going on up there, and they've even got this big Zappadoo gun set up because of the ominous threat of the bad, or the person that's up there. And here's one dude standing there talking to them at the top of the mountain saying, hey, everybody downstairs is wigging out, you want to take it easy? That's just a random page idea. Why don't I scribble it down? Afford yourself those opportunities. It's for you. I always suggest this, and I always stand by this. Your sketchbooks are yours. They don't belong to anybody else. They're yours. They're going to look like whatever works for you to put in those sketchbooks. You can have one sketchbook that looks one way, and the next sketchbook looks a completely different way, and both of those facilitate different things for you, and both of those are right. But what both of those things are doing, or any of the different ways that you approach your sketchbook are doing, is helping you to develop and grow. So allow yourself that, folks, and allow yourself to play with page breakdowns, thumbnails, scribbling out your pages like this, and then picking and choosing the lines, finding that key aspect of the page. What's the key point in that story that you're trying to tell? Or what did Loudon say? Loudon called it a key panel. It's far better with the vernacular than I am because I didn't go to the school. So, but allow yourself to explore whatever it is for you to pursue the opportunity to tell story. And when your comfort level is there for you to share that with others, please do. And yeah, I'd love to see it, and don't say to yourself, oh, it's not XYZ. It doesn't matter, because to somebody else it will be, and to somebody else maybe they have maybe if you're open to it, they'll be able to say, this works, but try this or this instead, and take no umbrage from that. Just allow yourself to go, oh, okay, I'll try this and this. Okay, maybe that works or that doesn't work. And but it's an exploratory process of expression, storytelling, and everybody has it in them. And I think it helps an awful lot of people deal with the world we live in order to find another means of communicating ideas and thoughts within themselves out to the world around them. So, yeah, if that's something that's of interest to you, then do it. Oh, I can't draw. I can only draw stick people. Fantastic. Draw stick people. Oh, I can't write. So just draw stick people and look at your stick people and realize, oh, hi, Bob. Hi, Bill. What's happening, Bob? Oh, nothing, Bill. Now you're writing a story. Right? Is it rudimentary at first? Of course it is. Eventually, Bob, I'd like to tell you about this perplexing situation that I'm having in my workplace. Well, I'm here to hear everything you have to say, Bill. It develops over time. But it's not going to do either one if you don't get started. So feel free to go and mix it up, folks. All right, that's about it for me today. I got to get going and doing some stuff. But thanks, everybody, for coming by and hanging out. And I'll be kicking around tomorrow. I'll be posting today's page up in a little bit. Yeah, I'll be kicking around, I think, around the same time tomorrow. So if you're hanging around, come on in, hang out. Anybody's got any questions or one-page story suggestions, feel free to put it in the comments on this video or on any of my social media posts. That's it for me. Bye for now, folks.